comfort and shallow pleasures, yet remain perpetually restless, dissatisfied, unfulfilled. Here's what they don't realize. That restlessness, that suffering, that nagging sense of being off track, these aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're signs that your daemon is calling you back to your true path. In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 unmistakable signs that your daimon is trying to get your attention, and why ignoring this call leads to a living death, no matter how much you achieve externally. If you've ever felt like you're sleepwalking through life, this video will wake you up. Before we can recognize when your daemon is calling, we need to understand exactly what it is. And to do that, we need to go back, way back, to ancient Greece. The Greeks understood something that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. That within each person lives an impersonal agency, a force of nature that carries your unique destiny. They called it the daimon. This isn't some New Age concept. Carl Jung spent decades studying this phenomenon. The philosopher Bernardo Kastrup describes it this way. The daimon remembers what is in one's image, belongs to one's pattern, and thus carries the essence of one's destiny. Think about that for a moment. The daimon remembers your pattern. It knows who you're meant to become. It's not concerned with your ego's desires for status, money, or social approval. It's concerned only with the unfolding of your true nature, the image you were born to express. Socrates claimed to hear his daimon as a clear voice, what he called his inner conscience, warning him when he was about to stray from his path. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most daimon-possessed figures in history, called it the inner tyrant and wrote, "I have an aim which compels me to go on living, and for the sake of which I must cope with even the most painful matters." Notice that phrase, the most painful matters, because here's what most people don't understand about the daimon. It doesn't care about your comfort. It cares about your destiny, and it will use whatever means necessary to steer you back on course, including suffering. We are segments of nature, not mere witnesses to it. We didn't parachute into nature. We grew out of it. Therefore, there is an impersonal will acting within us and through us. This is the daimon. When you're aligned with your daimon, when you're following your true calling, life becomes saturated with meaning. You may face tremendous challenges, but you'll never experience nihilism or lose touch with life's inherent purpose and magic. Depression and existential emptiness simply aren't part of the equation. But when you ignore your daimon, when you live according to social expectations, family pressures, or your ego's shallow desires, that's when the suffering begins. That's when you become what the ancient monks called a sedia, spiritually restless, unable to be still, constantly seeking distraction from the gnawing emptiness within. That's when you become the wanderer. The wanderer moves through life without true direction. They're constantly busy but never purposeful. They consume endlessly but are never nourished. They connect digitally but remain profoundly alone. They achieve externally but feel hollow internally. The wanderer has lost contact with their daimon. And that brings us to the 3 signs. The 3 ways your daimon is trying to break through your defenses, get your attention, and call you back home. The first sign that your daimon is calling is perhaps the most difficult to accept. Persistent suffering that you can't seem to fix no matter what you do. You've tried therapy. You've tried medication. You've changed jobs, changed partners, changed cities. But that deep sense of wrongness, that feeling that something fundamental is off, it persists. Here's what you need to understand. Not all suffering is pathological. There's a profound difference between what Jung called neurotic suffering and what we might call daimonic suffering. Neurotic suffering comes from unresolved psychological conflicts, traumas that haven't been processed, defenses that no longer serve you. This is the suffering that therapy can help with. This is the suffering that comes from being stuck in old patterns. But daimonic suffering, that's something else entirely. Daimonic suffering is your inner nature screaming at you that you're living the wrong life. It's the pain of betraying your own destiny. It's what happens when you ignore the voice of your daimon for too long. The medieval alchemists had a saying, "In sterquiliniis invenitur," in the filth it will be found. They understood that the treasure, the gold of self-realization, is often buried in what we consider waste, in what we want to avoid, in our suffering. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why terrifying? Because accepting yourself completely means accepting what your daimon is trying to tell you through your suffering. Maybe you're suffering because you're in a career that looks impressive on paper, but deadens your soul. Maybe you're suffering because you've built a life based on other people's expectations rather than your own calling. Maybe you're suffering because you have gifts you're not using, a voice you're not expressing, a path you're too afraid to walk. Your daemon knows this, and it will continue to make you suffer until you pay attention. There's a powerful teaching in the psychology of alchemy. The monster you fear becomes the savior you need. The thing you're running from, that persistent dissatisfaction, that nagging sense of meaninglessness, that suffering you can't fix, is actually trying to save you. It's your daemon, using the only language it knows will get through to you. Pain. Bernardo Kastrup puts it bluntly. The adequate reaction to suffering is to pay attention to it critically. For your suffering, unless it is self-imposed in an artificial manner, is trying to show you something, propel you towards something, force some creative act out of you. This is the fate of the Western mind, to be propelled forward by suffering toward creative expression and self-realization. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, but it's authentic. Think about the greatest creators, thinkers, and artists in Western civilization. Virtually all of them were driven by profound inner suffering. Nietzsche wrote his greatest works while battling debilitating illness. Van Gogh created his masterpieces in the midst of psychological torment. Jung developed his theories through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of such intense psychological crisis that he barely maintained his sanity. They weren't suffering because they were broken. They were suffering because their daemons were pushing them toward something they were born to create, express, or discover. So ask yourself, what is your suffering trying to tell you? What path are you avoiding? What calling are you ignoring? Because until you listen, the suffering will continue. The daemon is patient, but it's also relentless. The second sign that your daemon is calling is actually easier to spot, but just as commonly ignored. You have natural talents, abilities, or interests that come easily to you, but you're not using them. You're not developing them. You're not letting them guide your life. Here's a critical truth. The daemon as a force of nature isn't inconsistent. It doesn't call you towards something you're incapable of doing. It's not going to push you to become a concert pianist if you have no musical ability. It's not going to drive you toward writing if you can't string sentences together. Nature chooses its instruments wisely. As Kastrup explains, a telltale sign of daimonic presence is that it always pushes you towards something that, though not necessarily part of your personal agenda, you happen to be good at. Pay attention to that phrase, you happen to be good at. Not something you've forced yourself to become competent in through sheer discipline. Not something you've chosen because it pays well or impresses others, but something that comes naturally, something that flows. When you're aligned with your daemon, work doesn't feel like work in the conventional sense. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it requires immense effort, but it's difficulty of the right kind, the kind that energizes rather than drains, the kind that feels meaningful rather than meaningless. Think about the things you do where you lose track of time, the activities where you forget to eat, where hours pass like minutes, where you're completely absorbed. These aren't random. These are clues to your demonic path. But here's where most people go wrong. They ignore these talents because they don't fit into their life plan. They've already decided who they're supposed to be, based on family expectations, social pressures, or economic considerations, and their natural talents don't align with that predetermined identity. So they push down the calling. They tell themselves it's impractical. They say they'll pursue it someday when they have more time, more money, more security. But here's what happens when you do this. You become split. Part of you is living the life you think you should live, but another part, the part connected to your daimon, is dying from neglect. Jung called this individuation versus individualism. Individualism is crafting a personality based on ego desires and social conditioning. Individuation is becoming who you actually are, letting your true nature unfold. You can be whoever you want to be, sure, but you can only individuate into who you already are at the deepest level. And your natural talents are pointing you toward that identity. Now, I need to add an important caveat here. Sometimes what you think is your daimon calling is actually just a self-deceptive narrative. How do you tell the difference? Simple. If you think the daimon is forcing you to do something you not only don't wish to do, but also can't do, then think twice. It's probably not your daimon. It's probably your ego, crafting a story to avoid dealing with something harder. The daemon pushes you toward what you're capable of, even if you're afraid of it. The ego pushes you toward fantasies that let you avoid your actual work. Here's a practical test. Look at where you naturally excel. What do people consistently come to you for? What problems do you solve more easily than others? What activities restore your energy rather than deplete it? These are your talents. And if you're not building your life around them, if you're stuck in a career where you can't excel, pursuing goals that don't align with your natural gifts, then you're not following your daemon. You're living someone else's life, and your daemon won't let you do that peacefully. It will continue to create inner tension, restlessness, and dissatisfaction until you pay attention and make a change. The third sign that your daemon is calling is perhaps the most relevant for our age. You can't tolerate boredom. You can't sit in silence. You need constant distraction. Scrolling feeds, watching videos, listening to podcasts, anything to avoid being alone with your own thoughts. The philosopher Pascal wrote in the 17th century, "All of man's unhappiness comes from one single thing, not knowing how to stay quietly in a room." If that was true 400 years ago, imagine now, in the smartphone era. Here's the brutal truth. The daemon speaks in silence, but you never allow silence. Think about it. When was the last time you sat for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, with no external stimulation? No phone, no music, no book, nothing. Just you and your own thoughts. For most people, the answer is never. Or so rarely they can't remember. And here's why. In silence, you have to confront who you really are. In boredom, you have to face the emptiness that comes from living a life that isn't yours. In stillness, you hear the voice of your daemon, and what it's saying might be terrifying. It might be saying, you're on the wrong path. It might be saying, you're wasting your gifts. It might be saying, you're living someone else's life. So you pick up the phone, you scroll, you consume, you distract. Anything to avoid hearing that voice. The desert monks of early Christianity had a name for this, acedia. Sometimes it's translated as spiritual sloth, but that doesn't capture its essence. Acedia is spiritual restlessness, the inability to be still, to be present, to bear your own company. They called it the noonday demon because it struck in the quiet hours when there was nothing to distract them from themselves. And they knew that acedia wasn't just laziness, it was a profound spiritual symptom. It was what happens when you're living dissociated from your true self, from your calling, from your daimon. Now here's the paradox. Boredom, real uncomfortable boredom, is actually a portal. It's a doorway into your inner world. It's where the daemon can finally speak without competing with 1,000 other voices. As the transcript we analyzed says, boredom is not your enemy, it's your gift. But you have to learn to bear it. You have to develop what the monks called attention or watchfulness, the capacity to be present with yourself without running away. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself from the world. That's another trap, what we might call the shadow seeker, someone who isolates themselves obsessively with spiritual practices to the point of losing touch with real life. Jung was clear about this. One cannot individuate without being with other human beings. Individuation is only possible with people, through people. The self doesn't arise in isolation, it arises in relation. But you need both. You need time alone in silence, where you can hear your daemon, and you need time in the world in relationship where you can express what your daemon is asking you to create or become. The problem today is that people have neither. They're constantly connected but profoundly lonely. They're always consuming content but never in true relationship. They're perpetually busy but never present. They've become what we might call digital wanderers, moving endlessly but never arriving anywhere, consuming endlessly but never being nourished. And at the center of this pattern is a fundamental avoidance, avoiding the silence where the daemon speaks. So here's the question you need to ask yourself honestly. What are you avoiding by staying constantly distracted? What are you afraid to hear if you actually got still? Because until you create space for silence, real, uncomfortable space where you have to confront yourself, you'll never clearly hear what your daemon is trying to tell you. And the sign that you're avoiding this? You literally can't be still. You can't bear boredom. Your finger automatically reaches for the phone whenever there's a moment of downtime. This isn't just a bad habit, it's a spiritual symptom. It's yourself running from yourself, so you recognize the signs. You're suffering in ways that conventional therapy can't cure. You have talents you're not using. You can't tolerate silence. Your daemon is calling. The question now is, how do you respond? First, and this is critical, you can't force the daemon to reveal itself. You can't demand that it give you clear, immediate answers. The daimon doesn't work on ego time, it works on soul time. As Kastrup puts it, the daimon is not concerned with your personal agenda or timeline. It's concerned with your pattern, your destiny, and that unfolds on nature's own schedule. But there are things you can do to create the conditions where the daimon can speak and you can hear. First, embrace silence regularly. Start small. 10 minutes a day with no external stimulation. No phone, no music, no book. Just sit. Let the boredom come, let the discomfort come, don't run from it. This isn't meditation in the Eastern sense, where you're trying to empty your mind or achieve a transcendent state. This is Western attention practice, being present with what arises, observing your thoughts, feelings, and impulses without judgment, but also without completely identifying with them. In silence, patterns emerge. You start to notice what you're actually feeling beneath the constant noise of life. You start to hear whispers that have been drowned out by the cacophony of distractions. Second, pay critical attention to your suffering. Don't just suffer passively. Don't just take medication to numb it or go to endless therapy sessions to talk about it indefinitely. Ask, what is this suffering trying to tell me? What am I running from? What change am I avoiding? Write about it. Keep a journal where you explore these questions honestly, not for a therapist, not for social approval, but for yourself, to clarify what's happening beneath the surface. Third, experiment with your natural talents, even if it seems impractical. You don't have to quit your job immediately and bet everything on your calling, but you do have to start giving it space. If you're naturally good at writing but work in accounting, write in the mornings before work. If you're naturally good with people but stuck in an isolated technical job, find ways to mentor or teach on weekends. Give your daemon space to express itself, even if it's just an hour a day, and pay attention to how it feels. Does this activity energize you or drain you? Does it feel meaningful or meaningless? Does time fly or drag? These responses are your data. They tell you whether you're moving in the right direction. Fourth, avoid the shadow seeker trap. There's a real danger here I need to warn you about. Some people, upon discovering the concept of the daemon or spiritual path, become obsessed. They isolate themselves. They dive into spiritual practices to the point of neglecting real relationships, real responsibilities, real life. This isn't following your daemon. This is running from life through spiritual fantasies. Remember, you can't individuate in isolation. The self arises in relationship. You discover who you really are not by fleeing the world, but by engaging with it authentically. The hero's journey, the fundamental mythic pattern of the Western psyche, doesn't end on the mountaintop in solitary enlightenment. It ends with the return. The hero descends back into the world transformed to share what they've discovered. Your daemon calls you not to escape from life, but to live your specific life more fully, to bring your unique gifts into the world, to express your unique pattern, to fulfill your unique destiny. Finally, be patient but persistent. The process of reconnecting with your daemon doesn't happen overnight. It's an unfolding, a revelation that might take months or years. There will be periods of clarity where you know exactly what you need to do, and there will be periods of confusion where you feel completely lost. Both are part of the process. The daemon doesn't give you a step-by-step instruction manual. It gives you whispers, intuitions, symptoms, sufferings, clues that you have to learn to read. And the only way to learn is by practicing, creating silence, paying attention, experimenting, adjusting, continuing. Over time, the voice gets clearer, the path becomes more visible, and one day you look back and realize you're no longer a wanderer, you've become a seeker, and your daemon is no longer shouting in vain, you're finally listening. Let's recap the 3 signs that your daemon is calling. First, persistent suffering that you can't fix, no matter how many external solutions you try. This suffering isn't pathological, it's daimonic. It's your inner self screaming that you're on the wrong path. Second, you have natural talents you're not using. Things that come easily to you, that energize you, that make time fly, but you've pushed them aside because they don't fit into your predetermined life plan. Third, you can't tolerate boredom or silence. You need constant distraction because in silence, You'd have to confront who you really are and what your daemon is trying to tell you. And that's terrifying. If you recognize these signs in your life, then you're at a fundamental choice point. You can continue ignoring the call. You can keep anesthetizing the suffering, neglecting your talents, fleeing from silence. And if you do that, you'll remain a wanderer, perpetually restless, eternally dissatisfied, moving through life without true direction or purpose. Or you can answer the call. You can become a seeker. The seeker isn't running from the world. They're engaging with it authentically. The seeker isn't chasing spiritual fantasies. They're fulfilling their unique pattern, expressing their unique gifts, living their unique destiny. And here's what happens when you make this transition. Life becomes saturated with meaning. You'll still face challenges, perhaps even greater challenges than before, but they'll be your challenges, your work, your journey. As Jung said, the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. But I would add, you can only genuinely alter your life when you align with who you actually are, with the pattern your daimon carries. There's an ancient Gnostic phrase that captures this perfectly. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Your daimon is calling. The question is, will you answer? Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 3 signs resonates with you most? Are you experiencing unexplainable suffering? Have talents you're not using? Running from silence? Leave a comment below. I'm here and I read all of them. And if this video resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. This is part of the series How to Awaken the True Western Mind, exploring depth psychology, Western philosophy, and the path to an authentic, meaningful life. New videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. In the next video in this series, we're going to explore something even more provocative: why Eastern practices like mindfulness meditation might actually be weakening you, and what the authentic Western alternative is. But for now, the most important thing: create silence today. 10 minutes, no phone, no distractions. Just you and your thoughts. See what emerges. Your daimon is waiting.